Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the podcast. I'm with Amran Hussein here. Assalamu alaikum, how you doing?
Wa alaikum salam. How's it
okay?
going? Hijab, good?
Yeah, not
Good,
bad.
very good, bro.
Let's jump straight into this. We're obviously doing a response to Richard Dawkins and his podcast with Joe Rogan.
Who is Richard Dawkins, bro? For those that may not know.
He's an atheist apologist.
Okay.
Well, actually, I think for me to introduce him would be maybe a little bit not befitting. Maybe we should get one of his colleagues to introduce him.
Okay.
We have someone called E.O. Wilson, who is one of the most renowned biologists in the whole world leading biologists. This is what he has to say about him.
There is no dispute between me and Richard Dawkins, and never has been, because he's a journalist. And journalists are people who report what the scientists have found. And the arguments I've had have actually been with scientists doing research.
So he's a journalist.
Very interesting. So you were wrong when you said he's his colleague. He's not really his colleague, is he?
Yeah, good point.
He's someone that's in a totally different field, according to him. So very interesting.
Yes.
So I think we go with that definition.
I think the reason why Wilson said this is because of the ideological stance that this man is taking with scientific discourse. It's not just the fact that he's going into laboratory and just narrating kind of informatively the information that he's finding, is it?
Yeah.
This man is using science. He's weaponizing science, if you like, for ideological reasons.
Yeah. To be honest, it's very evident, bro, that he has he is an apologist for atheism.
Yes, of course.
He's just banging on about, this is the right thing, this is the right view, trying to indoctrinate children, the very thing we talked about, the very thing he's saying that other people are doing, religions are doing, when he himself is doing that.
Well, let's take a look at the clip where he actually, this is one of the things that came out in the podcast. It's a good thing you mentioned it, because it's one of the main things that were mentioned in the podcast. That one of the things that he finds wicked, in his words, or detestable, or whatever it is the quote-unquote indoctrination of children. So let's take a look at him saying that first of all, and then we'll switch to another clip.
And I said to him, "What's your target audience?" And he said 12. And I said, "Really? Are you really serious that you like to?" And he said, "Hell is such a terrible place that anything I can do to persuade children not to sin, and they must acknowledge Jesus and so on, is worth it." I thought that was a deeply immoral thing to say, but I think he was sincere.
So as you can see, he's obviously finding that quite disturbing.
Yeah.
But what I found interesting is that near the end of his podcast, he himself started saying, when he was asked, who were you trying to target with your book, he said it was children.
Yeah, the audience's publishers wouldn't really allow him to,
And the
target
publishers
from
would
that
do it.
perspective.
Let's take a look at that video there.
You wrote this. It's a beginner's guide, outgrowing God.
Well, it's for young people. I originally wanted to write a book for young children, and publishers didn't want to do that.
So, do you know what is it, Amran? Is it the fact? I think what it is that we have an uneven starting point.
Yeah.
That there is an assumption of neutrality when it comes to atheist discourse. At the end of the day, it's not agnostic discourse. This man is, maybe you could say, atheist, anti-theist, another thing. But this is certainly not a neutral discourse. And I think what he's trying to present it as is benign, neutral, and therefore children should know these arguments from the early age. But when it comes to religious discourses, that should be cancelled out. Or if you want to live your life through a religious discourse, that should not be afforded to you as a child. What do you think of this kind of...
With him, look, I think it's quite evident. I think people can see through this. So it's not going to be a shock when I say this. It seems like someone that's having what I call a late life crisis, right? He realizes he probably has a little more time on this earth, and may God guide him, but he is on a mission. He wants to establish atheism as the truth. And to do this, he does a lot of gymnastics. He links science with atheism as if they go hand in hand. He does a number of other reasons, such as say things about Islam, for example, which have nothing to do with Islam. He doesn't even seem to know much about Islam. Now, there was a point you wanted to mention regarding this, right?
Yes, I think this is the thing. One of the most disturbing things about this individual is that he does seem theologically illiterate. Let's take a look at one particular video that he actually, one part of the podcast, where he equates Islamic belief with Jewish belief and has something to say about what Muslims believe about Jesus Christ. Let's take a look at what he says on that issue.
There are lots of different religions, and Hindus believe in hundreds of gods, and Jews believe in one God, and Muslims believe in one God, and they don't believe in Jesus. And
So as you can see here, it doesn't seem to know that Muslims believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
Look, you've read his new book, haven't you?
Yes. Outgrowing God. We did a response to it as well. Now, this, some may argue this isn't really a blunder, whatever the case may be, but this is a common thread with him. It's a common trend with Dawkins.
Right.
He, even in his book, for example, there is a very clear, there's many blunders he makes, but one specific one, which is almost a schoolboy error. Because one thing that non-Muslims know about Islam, a few things if they know about him, is one is the Eid celebration, right? Maybe other things would be the 5 pillars, etc. But the Eid celebration is world known, right? Everyone knows. Now, when it comes to this, he says in one part of the book that, oh, look, the stoning of the stone, which happens during the Hajj, is a part of the Eid celebration. Now, obviously, that's not the case, right? Because we know those that are performing Hajj, they don't celebrate Eid. It's a part of the Hajj ritual, not the Eid celebration. And those that are celebrating Eid are not stoning the Jamarat, which is the pillar. They happen. The only thing is they coincide on the same day. Now, what's interesting is I was thinking, why would he make such a blunder? Well, one reason someone would make such a blunder is if they're using Wikipedia as their main source of reference. Because I went on Wikipedia, did a bit of a search, and the way this topic is covered, it's very unclear. So someone just reading that and using that as their main source of, or their main reference point, can easily fall into this.
So he went
mistake.
on Wikipedia.
I'm assuming that's what happened.
As the journalist that he is, as the atheist apologist that he is, and he wanted to get his sources for Islamic theology from some edited website, probably some.
That's what it seems like the case to be, because if you're going to make such a blunder,
yes,
the only place you can seem to make it, from my background and what I did some research on, is that it's Wikipedia.
And this is
I may be wrong, but
I mean, this is something Joe Rogan has to pay attention to if he's watching this video, and I hope that he does. That when you continuously, this lowers the grade or the stock of your podcast. You're bringing people who are non-specialists on certain topics. I mean, this guy is not a theologian, and he's certainly not a philosopher.
Yeah,
he is. I don't know what journalist.
If we're going by E.O. Wilson's definition, he's a journalist, a science journalist.
Science journalist, right? He does have some qualifications.
He's an evolutionary biologist, I think.
I don't think he's done biology. I don't know.
Not for a while, at least. It seems like.
Yeah.
He's known as a journalist.
But the point is, according to Wilson, he's a journalist. Fine, you're an atheist journalist. You come on BBC to do your atheist journalism. You come on Channel 4 to do your atheist journalism. They allow you on, which is problematic in the first place, especially for a neutral station like BBC, because they should be fair to all religions. You wouldn't bring a Muslim on to run a Muslim discourse or narrative. You wouldn't bring a Christian on to do the same thing. But the point is, you're not you have no fluency or you have no training in fields such as these. And in fact, you've made your name on the back of these world's religions. You make your money out the world, and you don't even know. You probably haven't even read a translation of the meanings of the Quran, for example.
But that's shocking, bro.
Which is very shocking.
And I think it's important you're making this point, because people need to know this. If you're going to be speaking about religion, and if you're going to be targeting, because two of his main audiences in his new book seem to be
children,
the American audience,
right?
In particular the American Christians, and the Muslim world.
Oh, really?
Right? He's highlighted this in other interviews, I think, on Channel 4 as well.
Oh, he said this in this podcast.
Well, there you go. So if that's your audience and you're addressing Muslims as one of your primary audience, at least have the what word can I use there? At least have the
common courtesy.
Yeah, to study the tradition. If you're going to comment on it, if you're going to write about it, if you're going to try to refute it.
Yes.
But if you've seen his book, another interesting thing he does is, when I was reading it, I was thinking, okay, where are the chapters dealing with the Quran? Where's the chapters dealing with Islam? There is no such thing in his book. He has chapters dealing with the Bible and the Christian tradition. All he does is he says, by extension, this also applies to Islam.
Right.
That is very
problematic.
Yes, that's terrible as far as.
Well, look, I mean, like you say, he's preaching to the choir. But if he does really, I mean, here's the thing. Here's a good thing to think about: the fact that he's never actually debated a Muslim.
Yeah.
And he's debated someone like John Lennox, who I believe destroyed him. You watched that debate as well.
Absolutely.
I think he completely annihilated. It was an annihilatory treatment.
It was, yeah, absolutely.
Richard Dawkins. And he debated others, I think William Lane Craig, but in some kind of panel discussion debate. So he's debated Christians before, but he's not debated Muslims before, let alone Muslims who have any kind of theological training or philosophical training. So, I mean, if he really feels strongly about what he believes in, don't you think it's a good idea for him to come out and actually start debating?
Absolutely. If he is addressing the Muslim world,
if he's trying to address the Muslim
then
world,
address a Muslim,
like for
in
example,
person, right?
We, as a collection of brothers, or whatever you want to call it, conglomerate of people who call to Islam, let's say, right? We have Arabic stations, we have Malaysian stations, Bahasa, things in different languages, and it reaches millions of people, right? So, for example, if we were to debate with him, it would he would be achieving his target objective. He'd be getting through to millions of people.
Yep.
You know, and all he has to do is accept our challenge. Like right now, we're challenging you, Richard Dawkins. Let's be straightforward. We're challenging you to come and debate, because at the end of the day, you've been speaking about Islam from the time you wrote The God Delusion.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And you mention Islam and Muslims all the time. But why not? Now you're almost 80 years old. Why not, before you, depart, leave the world or whatever, why don't you do one thing which you never had the bravery to do, or never saw fit to do before, which is to actually debate, put your ideas, make a critical observer, kind of scrutinize your ideas, especially of Islam. At the end of the day, if you're speaking about a world religion, why not put your ideas to the test against someone who knows that?
Let me ask you a question, bro, because something he says,
Yeah.
and I want to get your thoughts on this as well. Something he says is religions are comforting. This is why man made religion, right? Because it provides comfort, right? And he applies this across the board to Islam as well. What do you think about this particular statement of his?
No, it's true, isn't it? It's there's a beautiful hadith of Prophet Muhammad, which says, عجبا لأمر المؤمن إن أمره كله له خير وليس ذاك لأحد إلا للمؤمن إن أصابته سراء شكر وإن أصابته ضراء صبر وشكر. That wondrous is the affair of the believer, and that all of his affair is good. And this does not apply to anyone except for the believer. And if good things befall him, then he is thankful. And if bad things befall him, then he's also thankful. Meaning that everything has a purpose. There's an existential reason for our existence. And anything that befalls us, whether it be good or bad, is something which has a greater cosmic reason, right? The point is, what he went on to then say is that, well, this isn't a good enough reason to believe in the existence of God or religion.
Therefore you made it up.
No, but the thing is, we don't use this as an argument for God's existence.
Yes.
And we don't use this as a clarification point for why the Prophet Muhammad, for example, is a true prophet. So this is a straw man argument. And you'll find that he doesn't actually, this is something, a hallmark of his writings. I haven't read his most recent book, but I've read The God Delusion. And what I've noticed about how he kind of makes his arguments is that he doesn't actually spend a lot of time dealing with arguments, philosophical arguments for God's existence. He spent a little bit of time talking about Thomas Aquinas' proofs in the book. He didn't even go anywhere near the Hellenistic philosophers. Maybe he did, very
double
in a cursory way, in and out. He didn't even go anywhere near the philosophical arguments of the medieval Islamic period. He didn't even go anywhere near the theological writings of the Muslims. So this is not a serious academic exercise. What this is propaganda at its finest. And the guy doesn't probably even know the names of those books, and he doesn't even know how to access those books. And many of those books will be inaccessible for him. But he's not happy to sit and have his ideas scrutinized. He's happy, and you'll find that in the past couple of weeks or 3 or 4 weeks, the kind of people that he's been to are people that agree with him to a large extent.
Absolutely.
He's had podcasts with Cosmic Skeptic.
Yes.
I haven't watched that podcast, but I know that he's had one because I saw it on YouTube. He had podcasts obviously with Joe Rogan. He's going to atheists.
Absolutely.
So isn't it time for him to step out of his comfort zone? He's the one who talks to everyone about moving, employing criticality and rationalizing and being scrutinous and so on and so forth. So you're in your echo chamber. You're in your atheistic echo chamber. And you're just comfortable having discussions with people with like-mind opinions as you. Joe Rogan, the same thing can be said about him. I mean, to be honest with you, when was it? Look at this, right? Joe Rogan has I don't know how many different podcasts. Look how undiverse it is. When was the last time you saw a Muslim traditionalist on his show? Never. Maybe Faraz Zahabi is the only one. Probably. A proper Muslim traditionalist is the only time for us. Zahabi came on. I think maybe 1 or 2 other people, and the topic of conversation wasn't even religion. It was something else. So these people are not happy to come out of their comfort zone. They're speaking as if they own the keys to rationality and enlightenment, but they are not even happy to come out of their comfort zone.
Well, let's give Rogan the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he hasn't come across the opportunity to get someone that knows what they're talking about on the show to sort of counter what's been said from the other end.
He's not made an effort, to be fair.
So, well, here's an opportunity, right? If they want to, they can always pick up on that. If he wants to, he can always pick up on that.
Well, of course.
And I'm sure you wouldn't have a problem to go on there. And even if he
Me personally, look, we have mutual friends.
Yeah.
Like, for example, for us, Zahabi, if he wanted to easily get me on the show, or anyone else like me, then it would be very easy for him.
And even if it means to get Dawkins and you on at the same time and have a bit of a live discussion, that would be
That's
brilliant.
what it's got. Look, this is what people are going to start realizing this about the Joe Rogan experience. Yeah. That show, you just bring a certain kind of people like Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins. All right, fair enough. You have the right to do that.
Absolutely, yeah.
But you're not challenging yourself by bringing these people on to agree with you.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, where is the challenge in that? You're a man of martial arts. You know, what's the point of going to a place where there's no challenge? It's like sparring a white belt. No, seriously, it's like sparring a white belt.
Interesting analogy, yeah.
Go in with someone you don't. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from what I know. So go in with someone who can give you a bit of a, something to think about from another perspective, right?
Yeah.
And so what I think is that a lot of the things that, look, one thing that you need to understand, or that we need to understand, is that Richard Dawkins in that podcast, he didn't even make any arguments for God's for atheism.
And this is the sad thing. People just are so mesmerized by the fact that he is this name and someone that's so popular that they can't see past that, and they can't see the folly of the guy, right? Honestly, here's a man that spends an hour or so on the podcast, doesn't make one positive, strong argument, if any, even a weak argument against Islam, right? Or against God's existence or any religion. It's all
emotional arguments.
Emotional statements. This is what I think, this is what I believe, this is what we should do, this is what should happen, that's X, Y, and Z, and that's it, right?
Do you know what's even more interesting than that? There was a discussion about morality at one point in the podcast, and when he was asked about that, let's take a look at this actually. Let's take a look when he was asked about morality, how he responded, because he said he doesn't know how to peg his or what to peg his morality on. Let's take a look at what he says.
In Outgrowing God, I call it something in the air, which of course doesn't explain anything. But what I mean by that is that it's not literally hovering in the air, but it's a collection of conversations between people, dinner party conversations, parliamentary decisions, congressional debates, judicial decisions by judges, juries, newspaper articles, journalism. All these things together conspire together to produce something in the air, something that defines a given century or maybe even a given decade with the moral values of that decade.
Absolutely dumbfounded.
So as you can see there, I mean, what can we say about that?
Yeah,
he doesn't. So, but the thing is, what I find about this guy, to be honest with you, is that he's just employing a series of anachronisms and presentisms, right? Because he's saying, okay, well, we can't really answer the question of is morality true or not. In his book, I think it's The Blind Watchmaker. Yeah. I think this is the book that he wrote this in, that is only pitless indifference. There's no good and there's no evil. There's no. Yeah. So he doesn't believe in an objective morality. Yeah. Yet, despite the fact that he does not believe in an objective morality, he still labels Abraham Lincoln, for example, as one of the forerunners, the vanguard of morality, and he even used the word liberal. Yeah. And obviously, in this case, he means the political philosophy, liberalism. So the point is, where was this epistemic jump now from there is no objective morality to these are the moral people?
Yeah. Bro, it's just smoke and mirrors, I'll be honest. Yeah. This is what he's doing. You see in his new book as well, Outgrowing God. He has a chapter on this. How do we know, to do with how do we know what's good and moral without religion? All he is doing, he's bringing in several different things, such as he's a bit of evolutionary biology to explain morality, a bit of moral philosophy, a bit of what he calls what's up in the air, meaning times change, morality changes. There's discussions at dinner tables, there's discussions that philosophers and thinkers have. There are ideas that spread through society, writers, poets, etc. They come together, and all these ideas that have been thrown around, it creates something in the air which leads us to know what's right and wrong. So what he's essentially saying, bro, is his standard. One, he's confused and he can't peg it down. And two, at best, his standard for morality is just subjective. What's subjectively understood to be correct in the times that we live in. That is the anchor by which he's going to judge objective reality, objective truth, such as the tradition of Islam.
But that's the problem, because his arguments are actually moral arguments against
religion.
Yeah, so why should we not believe in religion because it's immoral to believe in religion.
Because think about this, when he attacks Islam, for example, on what basis does he want Muslims or people to not turn towards Islam? Is it based on rational arguments? No. It's based on his moral claims. Yeah. Islam is bad because of X, Y, and Z. Obviously, he's talking nonsense when he talks about these things. Anyway, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
He doesn't have read the Quran.
It's a joke. But that is his argument. But he is a man who doesn't have a moral standard. So if you go back, go down the rabbit hole, you see the guy has no leg to stand on, literally.
Do you know what I found really shocking about his book when I first read it? Not this new one, I haven't read that.
Yeah. You don't need to read it, bro. It's nothing special.
I'm pretty sure.
I'm sure you read was probably slightly more engaging.
In fact, at one point, our books, both me and Hamza, our books overtook his book, The God Delusion, in the Amazon bestsellers. And for those who want something to refer to, Hamza Zulz's book is called The Divine Reality. It's the second edition, is out there on Amazon now. My book is called Kalam Cosmological Arguments. Only £3. Let's bring it back to number one, because this
much cheaper than Dawkins' book at the moment.
Yeah?
I think.
See, look, he's trying to make money. We're not trying to make money. So the point I'm making is this. Let's go back to the point I was making, which was
to do his morality, his outlook, something about.
But there was something I looked at in his book, and do you know what I found really shocking and surprising is that in the beginning of the God Delusion, he said he doesn't object to a notion of God like that of Einstein's notion, which is like a deistic understanding of it. But that really, like, I was thinking, you really threw the cat in with the pigeons there, because you're saying you don't actually have a problem with the idea of an entity that brings rise to everything that exists, which is commonly referred to in the vernacular as God.
Yeah.
You just have a problem with the qualities that this God has been given.
Yeah.
At one point in the discussion, and this is where they think they've got the kind of, it's just so ridiculous. They think they've got like the strongest argument. They're talking about who designed the designer.
Yeah.
And this is like a 5-year-old question, a 7-year-old would ask this question, and probably an uninformed 7-year-old who designed the designer.
Yeah.
And we always ask the question: well, is God a designer, or is he the undesigned designer? Is he the creator, or is he the uncreated creator? So asking who created the uncreated is a contradiction in terms.
Absolutely.
And he doesn't seem to follow the arguments presented by philosophers and theologians of the uncreated creator. We're not saying that God is just the creator or the designer. We're saying that he's the uncreated
eternal
creator.
being, absolutely, right? And if you have a problem with this, then you have to show us otherwise, right?
Yeah,
but the issue, the funny thing is, and it's all wishy-washy philosophy on his part. Right. I don't think he's read up on any philosophy in any serious way. But what he suggests, his line of reasoning to make the point about who created God is, the universe is complex, therefore the creator must be complex, and therefore he needs to be explained too.
Right, exactly. Which is
okay. That's your opinion. Yeah. That's your. It doesn't mean it's what you're saying.
Remember, this guy's a materialist or something, right? Yeah. So he thinks that our understandings of complexity in the world must be in accordance with them. A metaphysical understanding will be the same.
Yes.
First of all, we don't concede to God being a complex being.
Yeah.
And number two, when we say God has many attributes, it's different to saying God has many parts.
Yeah, we don't compare him to the physical world or reality in any way, shape, or form.
His understanding is that, because he even mentioned this in the podcast, he said, look, at one point he was saying, look at the camera, it's very complicated and stuff like that. And this is something he always does. And this was his main argument in the God Delusion. And I'm just shocked and amazed that he's allowed to get away with this stuff on national TV. I'm shocked and amazed. Because on Channel 4, he said the same thing when he was speaking to the Asian man from Asian.
Guru Murphy, I think his name was. Yeah.
He was saying, look, he said, one of the most compelling arguments for God's existence is the argument from complexity, right? So he said that, well, you have these things like, for example, the camera is complex and this and that, and you wouldn't think that could just be kind of put together like randomly and so on and so forth. But he said this was our conception before evolutionary biology, or before the understanding of evolution. And now that we have our understanding of evolution, we no longer have to. And this is how they finished the podcast. And then in the Channel 4 interview, he was saying the same thing applies. And the man, what's his name? Sorry, the Asian guy.
Guru Murphy.
Yes, so he was like, what about the universe? Which is a good question, right? Because the universe is not there's a difference between physics and biology. I'm sure he's aware, right? He says, same thing applies. So he's he's projecting, this is myth. This is mythology.
Yeah.
He's projecting, right, a biological understanding of living organisms on non-living organisms. You know, rocks.
This shows a desperation to deny God.
Fictitious stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is mythology. This is atheist
pseudoscience at its best, basically, isn't it?
It's not even pseudoscience.
Yeah, it's beyond that, to be honest.
No, that's him. That's him really superimposing, and that's what the Quran says. لَخَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ أَكْبَرُ مِنْ خَلْقِ النَّاسِ وَلَكِنْ أَكْثَرُ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. You know that the creation of the heavens and the earth is bigger than the creation of human beings. But most people don't think about that. In other words, why are we starting with this comparatively insignificant life form on this planet Earth, when we have the whole cosmos, which is not actually biologically, it's not a biological. It's not biological.
Biology doesn't have a foot in the door at that point.
Exactly. So now, when you're talking about natural evolution and so on, okay, if you wanted to say that about, about living organisms, we at least can see where you're going with it, right? Yeah. We don't agree that it's unguided and that all of these things are unguided. However, if you're going to say the same thing about the celestial matter, the fabric of space, and the physical environment, the non-biological, now you're being ridiculous.
Yeah, this reminds me. This is this is what he's attempting to get Krauss to do at a point. He was hoping Krauss would be the one that introduces or discovers the evolution of the physical world as it's understood in biology, but obviously Krauss was dealt with by Hamza, and after that he moved on, or he's trying to find a replacement.
And I think, to be honest with you, after that debate with Krauss and Hamza, I think there's been a bit of a movement away from giving Muslims a platform, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because what happened after that debate is really, let's be honest, right? There was a big shift towards religion, and there was a big shift towards people, atheists, becoming less convinced.
Yeah, even till today, Hamza says people comment under that video saying, you know, what you said, there was truth in that, you know, and they're considering Islam and looking into it, and it's inspiring
that
many
video
people.
Got more than, I don't know how many millions, just in the English language.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it was so look, these people know what to do. If they really want their message to come out, they have to find the courage, you know, to get someone to debate them on these issues.
Yep.
Someone with a reach, someone who can, whose work will be translated in many different languages. I hate to repeat this point. He kept repeating the point that his book gets 13 million downloads in Arabic language, right? Yeah. Which, okay, many things get 13 million downloads in Arabic language. I'm sure many pornographies get. People are curious. It doesn't mean that people are becoming atheists. Yeah, people are becoming atheists as well, though. Yeah, it's true, right? Yeah. However, if you really want to have access points to the Muslim world, there has to come a time where you have courage enough to face someone with the ideas that you have. Now, you've nearly ended your life. I mean, you're 78 years old, Richard Dawkins. So it's not too late now to really kind of, sorry to say, man up, you know, and face a Muslim who knows what they're talking about, who has some kind of a platform, and we're happy to take him on.
Honesty and integrity dictates that if he is serious about his position, and he seriously believes in his position, and he wants to address the Muslim world, he has to step up. I don't see another way around it. He has to step up in his lifetime and face off, or in a public discussion or a debate, with a Muslim who knows their position. If he is honest about his position, otherwise you can't take him seriously.
This, man. Like, you know, there are many channels which are dedicated to translating our videos in the Arabic language.
Yep.
There's like maybe 3 or 4 major channels with tens of millions of views just on those channels. The same thing applies in Bahasa and basically the Malaysian and Indonesian area. So imagine if he debates one of us, right? I'm happy to debate him myself. He debates us. The video is translated into many different. How many views is that going to get?
Yeah.
If he really wants to access points to the Muslim world,
and he believes his message is strong, and he believes in the truth of what he believes.
Just let's be frank. How much coverage is that going to get?
A lot.
It's going to get way more coverage than it did in Channel 4.
It meets his objective.
It's going to get more coverage than the 13 million that he's talking about.
Yep.
So if his objective genuinely is to try and put his message to the Muslim world and not just preach to the choir and go to cozy little comfortable places, where people agree with you or your worldview, then you're going to have to put yourself in a bit of a scary situation. Sorry to say. And really, he has no excuse, because at this stage, we're introducing him to a platform, to a people which he would had no access to in different languages and so on. So I want to repeat the challenge. If you really feel like you want to speak about Islam and Muslims, then you should do it to Islam and Muslims.
Yep.
We alhamdulillah, like whenever we want to speak to Christians, we bring Christians to speak to.
Yep.
Speak to atheists, we bring atheists. Liberals, we'll bring a top-notch academic atheist. We'll speak to them.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you have the same kind of standards for yourself?
Absolutely. And I would even encourage his followers, those that take him seriously,
That's right.
to seriously consider what we're saying, and they'll probably realize if they're honest
Yes.
that they're making a valid point. The guy wants to address Muslims. He writes about Muslims. He wants to attack the Islamic tradition. Speak to a Muslim publicly.
One more
represent
thing
our position.
that before we end, I wanted to kind of mention, which is the point that Joe Rogan referred to as a home run, which is that he said, look, there's so many gods in the world. Look, there's so many religions. What kind of nonsense is that?
Yeah.
The argument is there's so many religions,
Therefore, they're all wrong.
therefore they're all wrong.
Yeah. And he makes Dawkins the same type of claim. There's so many gods, therefore they're all wrong. That's what he does.
Right. So look, why not Zeus? Why not Hercules? I don't know why. I mean, where do you even begin with such nonsense? Because the truth is this, is that number one, when we refer to God, let's just make this very clear so that atheists at least have an insight, because I'm sure some atheists are going to be watching this video, and hopefully Richard Dawkins himself will have at least some access to this video. Maybe Joe Rogan himself, who is yet to put me on the show, and hopefully might do so after this.
Yeah.
But the point is this, is that the thing is about when we talk about God, when we say God, what do we mean? Right? We know that there are many gods in the sense that there are many gods that have been, there are many objects of worship.
Yep.
There have been many objects of worship historically and currently, contemporaneously. We see that there are many objects of worship. Hercules is an object of worship. Zeus is an object of worship, right?
Yep.
Jesus is an object of worship. When monotheists, or people that he has a fetish with really, or fixation with, people from the Abrahamic religions, when we're referring to God, barring maybe Trinitarian understandings, for now, what we're talking about is the creator of the universe.
Yep.
Okay, the one creator of the universe, the all-powerful, the all-knowing, the all, and so on and so forth, right? And the argument should not be strawmanned. What we're saying is that there is one creator of the universe who is pre-eternal, post-eternal, all-powerful, all-knowledgeable, and which brought rise to everything that exists. This is our conception of God. Obviously, there are other attributes as per the religious traditions, and you'd have to go into which book one believes in and so on to kind of know the attributes of God.
Yeah.
But when we talk about a God, the creator of the universe, that's where the conversation should be. If someone believes in an object of worship that's outside of that, we would say, okay, well, that is their object of worship. We wouldn't deny that for them. However, when we are talking about something which started up the universe, that is what you need to disprove.
Absolutely.
Not talk about spaghetti monster or Zeus and then he calls it a home run. What's a home run about it? Sorry to say.
Yeah.
There's nothing home run about that, my friend.
Yeah, look, that particular point could be seen from many different perspectives, right? It could just be highlighting human nature. That we human beings, by their very nature, are drawn towards worshipping
and I think they acknowledge that.
Okay, good. But also, this can also highlight a point that we understand from the Islamic tradition, which is that God sent messengers throughout history with the same fundamental message. Right? Obviously, the laws and rules were different for different societies and communities, but the fundamental message about God's existence, who He is, His nature, and the purpose of human life was always the same. And what we see is that people change the revelation of time. What's interesting, bro, historically, I mean, looking into this recently, there are two general theories of the religion of history, the history of religion. The one line of thinking which has become predominant after the early 20th century and the debates that they had was that it starts with a polytheistic type of outlook and then it develops to a monotheism. But there was very strong evidence, which the other camp hold and still do, some people, that it started off with monotheism and then it developed to polytheism, which is people changed it, added gods, added deities, etc. So this particular point is not a home run. It could be seen in many, many different ways. I don't know why they see it as such a strong point against God or religion in any shape or form.
So what we could we not say that to make sense of the data, because as they acknowledge, deification of some object of worship is something which is concurrent in all human civilizations.
Absolutely, yes.
We have an implanted receptivity to believing in God. In his own university, Richard Dawkins, Justin Barrett, I think it is.
Justin Barrett, yes.
Yes, he mentioned this on the Oxford Anthropological Society in 2011, that we have this implanted kind of receptivity to the
we're hardwired to believe in so on.
We believe in God, right? However, having said that, now the question is, how would you explain the data and why are we? This is the question, right? So the Islamic narrative, which he hasn't really understood, I don't think, which is a very basic narrative, is there's messengers and prophets that came before time. All of them came with the same message, that there's only one God worthy of worship, and that you have to worship him, the creator of the universe, etc. And that this is the way to worship him. And there's some evidence that the prophet comes with, whatever prophet it may be. And Jesus is a prophet for us and is the Messiah, which I'm sure he didn't know.
Well, now he'll know.
Now he should know. Right? So he's one of the people who came before time to the children of Israel. Prophet Muhammad is the final prophet. This is the narrative that he needs to properly understand before he tries to even refute. One thing I do agree with them on, though, which I don't think many people would know that we agree with them on. But I think it's a good place to end this conversation because we don't want it to go too long because people have things to do. And obviously, this is, I think it's enough as a
more than enough. I think
but the point is, at one point, I think the real concern that they had was teaching children about the hellfire and scaring children with the hellfire. Look, from an Islamic perspective, you know, the hadith says, رُفِعَ الْقَلَمُ عَنْ ثَلَاثٍ, that the pen has been lifted upon three types of people, and one of them is الصبي حتى يحلم, you know, the young one until they become pubescent. The point being is that I agree with the fact, totally agree with children should not be scared with the hellfire.
Absolutely,
because that is not in line with the Islamic narrative.
No, of course,
The Islamic narrative does not say that children will go to hell. So for a parent to try and use this as some kind of teaching method, you know, I think even the Christian, you can even argue the Christian narrative said the same thing. Allahu alam, like we can do a study on that. But the point is that religious people shouldn't, some of them do, right? They shouldn't use hellfire as a means to frighten their children and as a means to get them to do what they want to do. Because at the end of the day, what happens is those children end up being frightened, and it could actually end up lingering in their minds. And
absolutely, it does.
It could.
In many cases it does.
And moreover, it's not true.
Yeah,
it's not true that those children, because they're misbehaving, are going to go to hellfire for doing so. So the point is that kind of a discourse should be confined to, or should be had with adults, adolescents. So with adults. So that's what I would advocate. I agree with them on that. But I think they don't know that we agree with them on these points. But just to kind of summarize what we're saying is that here, just as a final challenge, really, to both men, to Richard Dawkins and Joe Rogan. Look, as I say, look.
I thought you were going to say Richard Jokings. It was almost a Freudian slip there, though, on its way. But
you know, what I was going to say was, we're happy to communicate. Right? We're happy to have these discourses. We have the platforms. We have those platforms have different languages. If you really want access points to the Muslim world, if you really want to have conversations with Muslim representatives, which can be far-reaching, then we're here for you. We're here for you. And it's not going to be a hostile conversation, but it is going to be one of disagreement. And if you're ready for that disagreement, and if you're ready to defend yourself against that disagreement, and you challenge yourself and be critical about what you believe in, right? Then we're here to provide that service for you.
Brilliant. Wrap up on that.
Would you agree with that?
No, I completely agree with that. I think it's high time that he steps up and he takes on that challenge. And if he doesn't want to listen to us, his followers should encourage him to do that. We're here. It's open. It's on the table. It's going to be nice. It's going to be frank. It's going to be public. People are going to see. People will benefit. His followers will benefit.
And the Muslim world will get to hear his message.
Absolutely. It's a win-win-win from every single perspective. And if he doesn't step up, for me at least, it clearly outlines his, number one, his insincerity, and number two, his lack of belief in his own position. That's what it does.
I mean, look. Yeah. He went on a podcast with a person with a similar kind of reach as I do, just as one person who's cosmic skeptic. Who, by the way, I challenged and we had a debate in Oxford.
Yes.
He came on his podcast, had no problem with that, right? So if it's about getting the message to young people, is it about getting the message to young atheists, young white people, or do you really want to get the message to the Muslim world?
But saying that, I believe he'll never step up. He's afraid of the intellectual strength of the Islamic tradition, and he will never step up and he'll never debate a Muslim. That's just how I feel. I don't think he'll ever do it.
He doesn't need to debate us. Just come and discuss with us.
I don't think he'll come anywhere near you, bro.
Well,
but let's hope he does, and let's hope God guides him, before his time. But yeah, I think we're going to wrap up on that. I think we're good.
All right.
Yeah.
Anyways, jazakumullah khairan.
Thank you, bro.
Assalamu alaikum.